Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw for week 32. So this is the first week of August and another 7 curious, innovative and interesting, hopefully, things I've seen last week. Let's crack on. So first one is Nintendo's what people are calling the GIGALEAK. So this is a huge amount of leaked files that come from Nintendo. I'm not quite sure where it's come from. Couple of theories about that, but essentially it's hacked. So in this leak, there are a huge amount of historical files from Nintendo. So you got everything from Wario World to 1080 snowboarding to Mario Kart, for instance. So and what was interesting about it is it's sort of brought up a lot of hidden characters and demos and levels and even games that didn't exist before. So people have been going through them with a fine tooth comb, trying to things like the evolution of Yoshi, the character you're seeing, the sort of dinosaur looking character. If you play Nintendo games of old, you'll know what Yoshi looks like, and you'll be surprised to know that he was nearly a sort of a velociraptor at some point. So super interesting, to be honest. But the interesting also thing is there's a lot of people who aren't particularly keen on this. So there are games historians who essentially they're librarians of games and the culture of games. And obviously what this has done is it's blown a big hole in a very carefully prepared story and narrative from Nintendo over the years of how their games are perceived and the quality and the characters. So all of a sudden, there's quite a lot of mess gone on within the world of Nintendo games. Characters you thought you knew, all of a sudden, are now being diluted by characters that nearly made it, but you didn't know about. Anyway, so have a look at that, especially the link at the bottom of the description on the left-hand side, because that's got more of the actual files themselves. GPT-3. So this is a neural linguistic programming or processing algorithm that can generate language and text. So it can have conversations, it can write poetry, it can write prose. Now what was interesting about it is this is super powerful. So it's been trained on something like 175 billion parameters, or it has that when it's considering what it should write. So what this basically means is you can give it, for instance, the name of an author. You can give it a couple of words to base itself around, and then it will go off and write whatever it thinks it needs. So if you're in the world of fake news, this is marvelous. But the really interesting thing about it is that language is language. So HTML is a language, for instance. Music is a language of sorts, and it can deal with that as well. So what you're seeing in the top left is somebody just typing in far more descriptive versions of HTML. So I want a table of the richest countries in the world, blah, blah, blah. And it will actually do it. I want the ugliest emoji ever. And it will go away and it'll give you the HTML code for the ugliest emoji ever, as far as it can figure it out. It can also write guitar music, for instance. So it's super powerful. Dig into it, see what it can do. There are more and more demos coming up every day, but you might well be talking to a bot at some point in future, whether it be online help or even just straight up on Twitter. US, so this is moving by the day. So the US, or Donald Trump, is keen on banning TikTok. There are many reasons for this. Obviously, India did this about 3 weeks ago or so, and they cited national security because a lot of the data was being held and processed in China. Wasn't actually being spoken about in the terms and conditions. So what President Trump has obviously done is, there's another couple of reasons, which is one of his campaign rallies a couple of weeks ago was severely derailed by people on TikTok, essentially booking tickets to the rally, mobilizing themselves on TikTok, and then not turning up. So there were lots of empty seats, which was embarrassing. So obviously President Trump has got a bit of a bee in his bonnet about it, and has said he's going to block it. Now in reality, it's a little bit more tricky than that. In India, for instance, they've had to block it through TikTok blocking your account rather than the nation doing anything. So it's kind of up to TikTok to play ball. You can't really block it by IP, i.e. the country that you come from can be tracked. So anyway, it's very difficult to actually block an app on this scale. So what's happened is Microsoft have jumped in and said, well, okay, if you're worried about the data going to China, we'll host it and we'll kind of run it in this country. And therefore we'll try and buy TikTok, or at least buy part of the operations that will allow it to be legal in this country. Now, as of Monday, that seems to be going ahead. However, there's also an element, this has been tried before, and when people try to get essentially code released or code blocked, code was seen to be language, and therefore that's the First Amendment, so you can't stifle free speech because code is speech, it's words. So it's a really interesting one to try and follow to see what happens with this one. However, watch that space. Again, this is another one I've been dying to talk about for a while, but there's not really been anything to really talk about. So I reserve the right to talk about this on the 18th of August as well, which is when it launches. However, the beta demos of Microsoft's Flight Simulator have been released, and also the launch date, which will be the 18th of August. Now this has been I think the last one was in something like 2012 or something like that. So it's been nearly a decade since the last iteration of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So you don't really need to be into flight simulators to appreciate just how amazing this looks. So the things that about Microsoft Flight Simulator are it uses maps and satellite data to create the maps. It can create cities that don't exist by extrapolating or at least extruding up the buildings. It has real-time weather, it has all sorts of wind shear and clouds, it has all the airports in the world, it has 37,000 airports, again all generated from satellite data, and essentially it's amazing. You can also fly 747s as well as smaller craft and all of that sort of stuff. So it's just interesting. I'm not really a massive fan of flight simulators, yet I will be downloading this just to play it. So the visuals you're seeing right now are in-game visuals. They are not sort of generated for promo. That's what you'll actually get to see. So it's amazing. So huge amount of fans looking out for this. I think it's also going up on Steam and is also the #1 basically pre-ordered game on Steam as of the week it got announced. So there's a lot behind it. Pantone, every year if you follow Pantone they come up with their colours for the year, and this year is no different. So you can see on the left hand side the colours they are predicting this year. Now they've also teamed up with a company called Eurotech, who have also been essentially just looking at Instagram photos of fashion shows, and they have I'm not quite sure how they're doing it, but they've got sort of an algorithm that can look for the trousers and the tops. Obviously you can do that anyway, but they're also then using that to get the colour of them, but they're colour correcting it from the photograph. So what you'll often find is something that looks white or something that is white is often grey in a photograph, or it's got sort of lights next to it. So basically what they're doing is they're coming up with the more natural versions of whatever's in all of the autumn, winter fashion trends coming up, and they're then running it through their algorithm and telling you what the 5 essentially theme colours for 2020 autumn will be. So mint, pastel, earth tones, blue tones and pink are the themes. So if you're into Misty Jade, then obviously that's a bold bet, so you should be wearing that. But to be fair, I think they said this 2 years ago as well. I remember reporting on I think mint being the in colour. It never was, but there you go. Now again, this is, I always try and give myself something tricky to talk about. Now this is KV3SB5. Now a snappy material, so this is better than the TLY BS2 for instance, which was the previous material. Now these, there's a lot of really great words. I've got to read this sentence. This is the giant extrinsic anomalous Hall effect, which is basically exfoliable, highly conductive semi-metal with Dirac quasi-particles. Basically what that means is what you're seeing right in front of you on the screen right now is if you get a magnet and you put it in a grid, it can be either pointing south or it can be pointing north, or basically it can be a mix of north and south depending on how you've arranged the grid. If you put magnets in something like a hexagon or in a triangle, basically one of them's got to be north, one of them can be north or south, and the other one can be in between. What's called a frustrating magnet. It doesn't know, they can't decide which ones to line up because it just doesn't work, like it's not equal. So it turns out if you can create a cheap lattice that you can put these sort of magnets in, essentially, what it does is it creates this very strange way for electrons to go through. And the bit you read, which was the Dirac electrons, essentially, are seemingly lighter than normal electrons. So this is a really curious material that allows electrons to flow faster and in more intricate ways than normal. So you can dope it with electric fields, which is what the Hall effect is, so magnetic fields. Anyway, getting to the point is, it could be an interesting, cheap way of having an exotic material that could do things like superconducting, or could allow semiconductors to run at lower temperatures at cheaper prices and also faster. So watch this space. Hopefully they'll come up with a slightly funky name for it, but if you're into your quasi materials, then this is the latest, most exciting thing. And finally, robotic haircuts. So this is Shane from Stuff Made Here, which is an amazing YouTube channel. If you've never found it, you should do. Makes all sorts of really weird experiments. I mean, the guy is a machine, literally. He codes, he makes things on CNC machines, he does all the physics, all the maths, everything. So, and he's made himself a COVID hair cutting machine. So this, yes, it has scissors. It uses essentially a vacuum to pull the hair, and then little hands to then grip the hair, and then it uses all sorts of algorithms to figure out where your hair is, what sort of cut that you want, where the direction of the scissors. It's really, really complicated. And it's a video, I don't know how long it is, probably half an hour, but it's well worth a watch. If you're in any way technical or curious, it's a really great video. So that's pretty much it. So maybe this is the future of haircutting. Sorry, barbers and hairdressers out there. And with that, we are done. So thank you very much, and I will see you next week.